Hey guys, tonight we're taking a little trip back in time. Imagine, if you will, that cozy blanket you're snuggled under right now, the soft pillow cradling your head, the gentle hum of your modern world, maybe the faint glow of a screen nearby. Now, picture all of that vanishing in an instant. You drift off, your mind unwinds, and then thud, not the soft landing of your mattress, but something hard, uneven, and suspiciously damp. The scent isn't your lavender essential oil. It's a pungent mix of unwashed bodies, stale cooking fires, and something suspiciously like, well, let's just say it's not pleasant. You open your eyes, and the familiar ceiling of your bedroom is gone, replaced by a low, smoke-blackened timber roof. The air is thick with a chill that bites deeper than any air conditioning, and the only light comes from a sputtering, greasy lamp casting dancing shadows on rough-hewn walls. Your comfy clothes are gone, replaced by scratchy, coarse fabric that smells of earth and sweat. This isn't a dream. This isn't a Netflix documentary. This is your new reality. You've woken up in medieval times. And let's be honest, you probably won't survive this. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, if you're listening, let me know where you are and what time it is for you right now. I always love to see how far these sleepy stories travel. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You try to sit up, but your muscles protest, stiff and sore in ways you can't quite explain. The rough fabric of the tunic you're wearing chafes against your skin, and the straw beneath you rustles uncomfortably. Everything feels different, heavy, grimy. You glance down at your hands, expecting to see your own familiar digits, but they look older, calloused. There's dirt under the nails, ingrained deep, and a peculiar scar you don't remember on your forearm. A jolt of panic, cold and sharp, shoots through you. This isn't just a bad dream. This is real. The sounds are the first things that truly assault your modern ears. Not the gentle hum of electricity or the distant drone of traffic. No, here, the world is alive with organic noise. The rhythmic creak of timbers, a faint rustling from what you pray are just mice, and the distant, unsettling chorus of animals. Pigs grunting, chickens clucking, maybe a cow lowing somewhere far off. And voices, muffled, guttural, speaking. A language that sounds distantly English, yet entirely alien. It's like trying to understand a very old, very drunk relative. Historians still argue whether the common folk of 10th century England would be truly intelligible to a modern ear, even if you spoke Old English. Some say you'd catch a word here and there, like a faint echo, while others believe it would be like listening to an entirely different tongue. You, personally, are leaning towards the entirely different tongue theory, mostly because you can't make out a single comprehensible syllable that as your eyes adjust to the gloom, the details start to solidify. You're lying on a rough bed, just a wooden frame with a straw mattress, in what appears to be a very small, very basic dwelling. The walls are made of wattle and daub, woven branches plastered with mud and straw, and they offer little in the way of insulation. A small, open hearth in the center of the room sends wisps of smoke curling towards a hole in the roof, attempting, somewhat futilely, to escape. The air is thick with it, stinging your eyes and catching in your throat. You suddenly understand why everyone looks like they've spent their lives at a bonfire. No modern ventilation here, just good old-fashioned lung damage. You push yourself up, your limbs feeling sluggish and uncooperative. The floor beneath your bare feet is cold, hard-packed earth. Looking around, you spot a few meager possessions. A rough wooden table, a couple of stools, some clay pots, and a few simple tools hanging on pegs. There's no sign of anything familiar. Nothing that screams 21st century. No phone, no laptop, not even a plastic water bottle. Just medieval. A mainstream historical fact, often overlooked, is that most medieval homes, especially those of peasants, were single-room affairs where families, and often their animals, lived, cooked, and slept together. Talk about close-knit. Imagine having a bad hair day and sharing a room with a goat. Actually, maybe the goat wouldn't judge. You shuffle towards the door, a heavy slab of wood with a simple latch. The light seeping in through the cracks around it promises the outside world, whatever that might be. Every fiber of your modern being screams to run, to find a way back, to hit the emergency exit button. But there's no button. There's just this. The rough fabric of your tunic feels strange against your skin, a far cry from your favorite soft cotton t-shirt. You realize you're wearing what feels like a shapeless sack, tied at the waist with a simple rope. No pockets, of course. Where would you even put your phone? Oh, right. No phone. Just a profound sense of doom. As you reach the door, a sudden, sharp pain lances through your side. You wince, instinctively clutching the spot. You uncover the area, and there, on your ribcage, is a faded, angry-looking bruise. You don't remember getting it. In fact, you don't remember anything from before waking up here. It's like your memory has a giant, medieval-sized blank spot. This body, these clothes, this bruise, they're all part of the package deal, and you have no idea what that deal entails. A quirky tidbit. In medieval times, a pottage was a common meal, essentially a thick stew, and it could contain almost anything edible, from vegetables to meat scraps, often cooked for days, with new ingredients added as available. So, your next meal might be interesting. Let's just hope it doesn't involve whatever made that bruise. You take a deep breath, trying to calm your racing heart, and push open the door. The hinge groans in protest, a sound that resonates with the heavy sense of unreality still clinging to you. The outside world hits you like a physical blow. The air is sharper, colder, and carries an even stronger cocktail of smells: wood smoke, animal dung, damp earth, and something vaguely metallic, like blood or rust. The light, though, still dim from the overcast sky, makes you squint. You're standing on the threshold of a small, mud-spattered hovel, part of a cluster of similar dwellings. This isn't just a village. It's a collection of glorified mud huts. You can see fields beyond, stretching out under a gray, indifferent sky, and a track, churned into mud, winding through the scattered buildings. This isn't just medieval. This is dirt. This is cold. This is real. And for some reason, your stomach is rumbling, demanding sustenance from a world that clearly doesn't believe in late-night snacks. You step out fully, the cold biting at your exposed skin, and take in the panorama of your new, unwelcome existence. The air, as mentioned, is a symphony of scents you'd normally cross the street to avoid. The ground beneath your feet is a mixture of mud, straw, and something suspiciously granular. Best not to think too hard about that. Your gaze sweeps across the small collection of hovels, all variations on a theme of timber, wattle, and thatch. Smoke curls lazily from holes in their roofs, painting the already gray sky with more shades of soot. It's undeniably picturesque in a bleak, historical sort of way, like a scene from a very depressing period drama you accidentally fell into. Suddenly, a cacophony erupts. The sound of pigs squealing, a dog barking furiously, and then a harsh, guttural shout. Your head snaps towards the noise. A figure emerges from one of the nearby huts, a man, broad-shouldered and dressed in similar rough clothing to your own, wielding what looks like a very large, very blunt stick. He's yelling, not at you, thankfully, but at a particularly stubborn pig that seems to be having an existential crisis about being herded. You watch, transfixed, as the man eventually prevails, prodding the protesting swine towards a pen. This is not the bucolic, gentle pastoral life often romanticized in fiction. This is loud, dirty, and requires a lot of patience with livestock. And you just realized you might have to learn how to do that. Great. Your LinkedIn profile doesn't exactly scream expert swineherd. You start to move, cautiously at first, then with more purpose, your eyes constantly scanning, trying to make sense of this alien landscape. The ground is uneven, pocked with puddles and divots. A few chickens scatter as you approach, clucking indignantly. Your modern brain, accustomed to paved sidewalks and clear paths, struggles with the sheer messiness of it all. There's no municipal waste collection, obviously. Everything just is. Dung, refuse, discarded bones. It's all part of the organic tapestry of medieval life. A mainstream historical fact is that hygiene was, by modern standards, incredibly poor. Diseases spread rapidly due to contaminated water, lack of sanitation, and close living quarters with animals. You suddenly feel an intense, irrational desire for hand sanitizer, or maybe a full-body hazmat suit. As you walk, your senses continue their relentless assault. The distant ring of a blacksmith's hammer carries on the breeze, a steady clang 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 that speaks of laborious craftsmanship. The smell of burning wood is constant, layered with the metallic tang of unwashed bodies and the damp earth. You pass by a small, muddy stream where a woman is scrubbing clothes on stones, her hands red and raw from the cold water. She glances up as you pass, her eyes shadowed and tired. Briefly, meet yours. There's no curiosity, no recognition, just a fleeting, almost animalistic assessment before she returns to her arduous task. It's a sobering reminder that you are just another face in this difficult existence. You're not a tourist here, you're just here. The sounds of daily life are a constant murmur. The creak of a hand mill as someone grinds grain, the lowing of cattle from a nearby pen, the persistent buzz of flies. Yes, even in the cold, because where there's muck, there's flies. It's an auditory tapestry woven from the rhythms of pre-industrial life. No cars, no planes, no buzzing refrigerators. Just the raw, unadulterated sounds of humanity and nature coexisting, often uncomfortably. You realize how much background noise you're normally exposed to, how much your ears filter out. Here, everything is amplified, every rustle, every grunt. It's overwhelming, yet strangely hypnotic. You stumble slightly, your eyes glued to a small group of children playing near a pile of logs. They're dressed in rags, their faces smudged with dirt, but their laughter, high and clear, is universally recognizable. They're playing with what look like crudely carved wooden dolls and sticks, mimicking the adults around them. No iPads, no video games, just imagination and whatever they could scrounge. A quirky tidbit. Medieval children often had very short childhoods by modern standards, being expected to contribute to household labor from a young age, sometimes as early as 5 or 6. That's right, no endless summer breaks or nagging about chores. Here, chore time was pretty much all the time. You suddenly feel very old as you continue your aimless wander. You notice the lack of personal space. People move close to each other, their bodies accustomed to brushing elbows, to sharing the limited warmth of a hearth. There's no concept of personal bubbles in a world where everyone lives practically on top of each other. You feel a pang of discomfort, your modern sensibilities clashing with this ancient reality. You're used to standing in line with a respectable amount of distance, not having someone's breath on your neck while they chop wood. It's an intimate, sometimes claustrophobic existence. The structures themselves are a testament to necessity and available materials. The roofs are thatched, thick layers of straw or reeds expertly woven to shed rain. The walls, as you noted, are wattle and daub, sometimes reinforced with larger timbers. Windows are small, often just unglazed openings, covered with shutters or, if you're lucky, a piece of animal bladder to let in a diffused, yellowish light. Glass, even small panes, is a luxury reserved for the very wealthy or important buildings like churches. So, no gazing out a pristine pane at the world. Just murky, filtered gloom. You try to get a sense of the time of day, but without a clock or a smartphone, it's surprisingly difficult. The sun is hidden behind thick clouds, making the light uniform and flat. There's a general sense of activity, people moving with a purpose, but no frantic rush. Life here moves at the pace of the seasons, the sun, and the demands of the land. It's a stark contrast to the relentless ticking clock of your former life. No urgent emails, no deadlines, no traffic jams. Just the steady, unyielding march of agricultural survival. Historians still argue whether medieval peasants truly had a concept of leisure time, as we understand it, or if every moment was simply a part of the larger rhythm of work and necessary rest. You're leaning towards the latter. You don't see anyone lounging on a chaise lounge, sipping a latte. More like squatting in the mud, sipping. Well, probably not latte. A group of women pass by, carrying wooden buckets towards a well. Their clothes are simple, homespun wool or linen, dyed in muted, earthy tones, browns, grays, and faded blues. Their hair is often covered with simple veils or caps, practical for keeping dust and dirt out. There's a pragmatic beauty to their attire, designed for durability and function, not fashion. You realize your current outfit is remarkably similar, though probably less well-made. You also realize you have no idea how to wash this outfit. Or yourself. The subtle scent of stale body odor clinging to your tunic is becoming increasingly noticeable, and it's definitely not your signature scent. The ground underfoot is increasingly muddy as you approach what looks like the central area of the village. The track widens, and you see more people, more activity. A small pen holds a few sheep, their wool matted and dirty. A lean, wary dog trots past, sniffing the ground. The very air feels heavier here, denser with the accumulation of human and animal presence. Every step is an effort, your unfamiliar shoes, rough leather, poorly fitted, pinching your feet. You miss your sneakers. Oh, how you miss your sneakers. And socks. The thought of clean, dry socks is now a profound, aching desire. It's the little things, isn't it? The things you take for granted until they're gone, replaced by scratchy wool and cold, damp earth. You briefly wonder if anyone in this entire era has ever experienced the simple joy of a hot shower and freshly laundered clothes. Probably not. Your stomach rumbles again, a low, protesting growl that echoes in the surprisingly quiet village. Quiet. That is, save for the ubiquitous animal sounds and the distant hum of human activity. The sheer effort of existing in this new reality is already draining you. You've noticed the pervasive scent of wood smoke, the damp chill, the constant presence of mud and grit, but now a new, insistent sensation demands your attention. Hunger. Not the polite, I could go for a snack, kind of hunger, but a deep, gnawing ache that feels like it's been there for days. You realize you haven't eaten, or at least you don't remember eating, since before you woke up here. You approach a small, open-sided structure that seems to be the hub of some activity. A few men are gathered, their faces grim, their hands calloused. They're handling sacks of grain, their movements practiced and efficient. This must be where the village stores its precious harvest. Grain, you realize, is probably the most important thing in this world. More important than gold, more important than fancy clothes, perhaps even more important than a good internet connection. Without grain, there's no bread, no beer, no gruel, nothing. A mainstream historical fact is that the vast majority of the medieval population, around 90%, were peasants, and their lives revolved entirely around agriculture. Their very survival depended on the success of the harvest. If crops failed due to drought, flood, or pestilence, famine was an ever-present threat. And you can almost taste that threat in the air. You watch them work, trying to decipher their expressions. They look tired, resigned, but also purposeful. This isn't work. That's done for a paycheck or a promotion. It's work that's done to survive another day. There's a certain grim nobility to it, you have to admit, even as your own pampered body shivers in the cold. You recall a quirky tidbit you once heard. During times of severe famine, people would resort to eating anything, including tree bark, roots, and even mud mixed with straw, just to fill their stomachs. The thought sends a shiver down your spine that has nothing to do with the cold. You glance around, suddenly assessing the local flora with a newfound, slightly desperate interest. Are those dandelions? Can you eat dandelions? What about that patch of is that moss? Don't even think about it. Point one of the men, seeing you standing there, gives you a curt nod. His eyes are shrewd, assessing. You realize you must look out of place, even if you're dressed like them. Your bewildered expression. You're clean, for medieval standards. Hands, the way you carry yourself, it all screams, not from around here. You try to offer a polite smile, but it feels clumsy on your face and used to this kind of interaction. He grunts something unintelligible and turns back to his task. The language barrier is a wall, thick and unyielding. You briefly consider trying charades, but quickly dismiss the idea. You don't want to seem too odd. Your stomach clenches again. You remember reading somewhere about medieval food, how bland and monotonous it was. Porridge or pottage, made from grains and whatever vegetables were available, was a staple. Meat was a luxury, usually reserved for feast days or for the lord and his family. Bread was the staff of life, but it was often coarse, made from barley or rye, dark and heavy, a far cry from the fluffy white loaves you're used to. Forget sourdough, artisanal anything. This is just bread. Dense, likely stale bread. You start walking again, drawn by the faint scent of something cooking, a smoky, savory aroma that, despite your misgivings, makes your mouth water. You follow your nose to a small fire pit outside one of the larger huts. An older woman, her face a roadmap of wrinkles, is stirring a large iron pot hanging over the flames. Steam rises, carrying the scent of boiling vegetables and, you hope, some kind of meat. Maybe a rabbit? Or a very small, very unlucky bird? As you get closer, you see a few other villagers sitting on logs around the fire, quietly eating from wooden bowls. Their movements are slow, deliberate, savoring each mouthful. Food isn't just sustenance here. It's survival, a precious resource. You feel a sudden surge of self-consciousness. Do you just sit down? Do you ask? With no shared language, how do you even begin? You hesitate, feeling like an alien anthropologist observing a foreign culture. Then, the woman stirring the pot looks up. Her eyes, though ancient, hold a spark of curiosity. She says something, a string of those incomprehensible guttural sounds, and gestures towards an empty spot on a log. It's an invitation, a lifeline. You nod, grateful beyond words, and carefully sit down, trying not to track too much mud. She ladles a portion of the thick stew into a rough wooden bowl and hands it to you, along with a piece of dark bread. The bowl is warm against your cold hands. You take the first cautious bite. It's something. The stew is thick, earthy, and surprisingly hearty. You identify roots, some kind of greens, and indeed, what tastes like very tough, stringy meat. It's not delicious, not by any stretch of the modern culinary imagination. It lacks seasoning, finesse, and frankly, a strong identifiable flavor beyond stew. But it's warm, and it's filling, and for the first time since you woke up, your stomach stops its desperate protests. You eat slowly, savoring the warmth, the simple act of consumption. The bread is heavy, dark, and chewy, requiring a good deal of effort to tear and masticate. It tastes of grain, earth, and effort. This is not the artisan bread of your dreams, but it is bread nonetheless, and it provides a comforting density in your stomach. You notice everyone around you uses their hands. There are no forks, maybe a crude spoon here and there, but mostly, it's finger food. You adapt, quickly realizing that polite table manners are a luxury you no longer possess. As you eat, you observe the others. They eat in silence, or with low murmurs, their faces showing the weariness of hard labor. There's a quiet dignity in their movements, a focus on the immediate task of nourishment. This meal isn't a social event. It's a necessary refueling. You wonder about their lives, their hopes, their fears. Do they ever dream of a world with hot showers and soft beds? Do they know of such comforts? Probably not. Their world is limited, circumscribed by the boundaries of this village, the changing seasons, and the demands of their lord. Historians still argue whether medieval peasants truly felt oppressed by their feudal lords, or if their lives, though hard, were simply accepted as the natural order of things, a divinely ordained hierarchy. You, personally, feel pretty oppressed by the constant grime and lack of indoor plumbing. When you finish, you hand the empty bowl back to the old woman. She gives you a small, almost imperceptible smile. It's the first real kindness you've received in this new world, and it feels like a beacon in the pervasive gloom. You realize that despite the harshness, there's still humanity here, still moments of connection. You also realize you have no idea how to say thank you in this ancient dialect. You settle for a heartfelt nod and a hopeful, awkward smile. It seems to suffice. The sun, or what passes for it on this perpetually overcast day, begins to dip towards the horizon. The light softens, turning the gray landscape into muted shades of brown and purple. The air grows even colder, and the smoke from the hearths becomes more pronounced, rising in thicker columns. The villagers begin to disperse, heading back to their humble dwellings. The brief warmth of the communal fire dissipates, leaving you once again facing the chilling reality of your situation. Your stomach might be full, but the existential emptiness remains. What now? Where do you sleep? Do you have a family here? You're a blank slate in a world that doesn't do blank slates. As dusk deepens, a new kind of chill settles over the village, one that penetrates deeper than the physical cold. It's the chill of uncertainty, of vulnerability. You're fed, for the moment, but the question of shelter looms large. Do you just wander back to the hovel you woke up in? Is it even your hovel? And if so, Who else lives there? The thought of sharing a single, smoky room with strangers, or worse, with livestock, sends a fresh wave of unease through you. Your modern concept of privacy, a luxury you never even registered, now feels like an alien and unattainable dream. You slowly make your way back towards the cluster of huts where you first emerged. The sounds of the village are softening, morphing into the nocturnal symphony of the countryside. Crickets begin their chirping, a distant owl hoots, and the low, contented murmurs of animals settling down for the night drift on the air. The faint glow from open doorways casts inviting, flickering light onto the muddy paths. It's a scene both timeless and utterly foreign. You imagine your own bed, your own quiet room, the gentle glow of your bedside lamp, and a wave of profound homesickness washes over you. You miss Wi-Fi more than you ever thought possible. As you approach the hovel, a small figure steps out of the doorway. It's a child, no older than 4 or 5, dressed in simple, patched woolens. The child looks up at you, eyes wide and unblinking, then points a small, grubby finger towards the hovel's interior and babbles something in that incomprehensible dialect. There's no fear in the child's gaze, just a simple, unadulterated expectation. It seems you do belong here, at least to this tiny human. The realization hits you with a strange mix of relief and dread. You're not alone, but you're clearly part of something you don't understand. This could be your medieval family. Or, just some random kid who thinks you're their designated adult. Historians still argue whether medieval family structures were primarily nuclear or extended, but certainly multiple generations often lived under one roof, especially in peasant communities. Space was at a premium. You tentatively step back inside the small dwelling. It's even darker now, with only the embers of the hearth providing a faint orange glow. The smoke is thicker, making your eyes water. The child follows you in, then scurries towards a dark corner, seemingly accustomed to the dimness. You strain your eyes, and as they adjust, you realize there are indeed other forms huddled in the shadows. A woman, older than you, perhaps in her 50s or 60s, is curled on a straw mat near the hearth, a rough blanket pulled over her. Another figure, seemingly male, is stretched out on a similar mat on the opposite side of the room. This is it. This is your new living situation. No private bedrooms, no personal space. Just a communal, smoky hovel. You sigh? At least there's a roof over your head. Even if it feels more like a chimney, you gingerly pick out a spot near the wall, away from the direct smoke, and lower yourself onto the hard-packed earth. The floor is cold against your legs. You try to arrange your rough tunic to offer some warmth, pulling your knees up to your chest. The straw mattress you woke up on now seems like a luxury. You realize you're probably expected to sleep on the floor like everyone else. Welcome to the medieval budget hotel, where the stars are literal and the thread count is 0. Sleep, however, proves elusive. The cold seeps into your bones, the hard ground presses against your hips, and the strange, unsettling sounds of the hovel and the village beyond keep your senses on high alert. The faint rustling in the straw, the occasional snort from what you hope is just an animal outside, the rhythmic, heavy breathing of your new family. It's a symphony of discomfort. You miss the hum of your refrigerator, the distant whir of your laptop fan, even the polite traffic noise from your old life. Here, the silence is punctuated by organic, sometimes unsettling, sounds. You also become acutely aware of the smells again. The pervasive scent of wood smoke is now joined by the distinct odor of unwashed bodies. You realize, with a sudden, uncomfortable jolt, that you are part of that smell. You haven't had a proper wash since you arrived. You try to remember the last time you took a shower in your old life, but the memory feels impossibly distant, like a dream you're struggling to recall. A mainstream historical fact is that personal hygiene as we know it simply didn't exist for most people in the Middle Ages. Bathing was infrequent, often limited to a few times a year, and usually involved a shared tub and water. Soap, if available, was harsh and made from animal fat and lye. Body odor was just a fact of life. You quickly come to terms with the fact that if you survive this, you're going to need a very, very long bath. And possibly a hazmat team. As the night progresses, you become aware of another uncomfortable truth, the constant itching. You try to ignore it at first, attributing it to the rough wool of your tunic and the straw you slept on. But it persists, a maddening, crawling sensation that makes you want to tear at your skin. You realize, with dawning horror, that you probably have lice. Or fleas. Or both. A quirky tidbit about medieval life is that fleas and lice were incredibly common companions. Even for the wealthy, they were simply an accepted part of existence. So much so that flea combs were common personal items. You suddenly understand why everyone always seemed to be scratching themselves in historical dramas. It wasn't just dramatic effect, it was simply accurate. You consider the implications of this. How do you get rid of them? Do you just live with them? The thought sends a shiver of disgust through you. Your delicate modern sensibilities are taking a beating. The air inside the hovel feels stagnant, heavy. There's no cross-ventilation, just the smoke hole in the roof, which only manages to let out a fraction of the fumes. You cough, a dry, rasping cough that feels alien in your throat. You imagine the medieval lungs of these people, constantly bombarded by smoke and damp. No wonder life expectancy was so low. You mentally add oxygen concentrator to your ever-growing list of things you miss. Sleep eventually claims you, but it's fitful, punctuated by the cold, the itching, and the unfamiliar sounds. You drift in and out of consciousness, your mind, a jumble of modern memories and medieval anxieties. You dream of clean sheets, of running water, of a world where you can simply choose to be alone. When you finally stir in the morning, the light filtering in through the cracks is still dim, and the air is still heavy with smoke. Your body aches in places you didn't even know existed. Your mouth is dry, your throat scratchy. You feel, for the first time, truly, physically exhausted, not from work, but from the sheer effort of simply existing in this raw, unpolished reality. The older woman from last night is already stirring, poking at the dying embers in the hearth, trying to coax a flame. The child is still asleep, a small, innocent lump under a blanket. The man is also beginning to move, grunting as he stretches. It's a new day in your medieval life. And with it comes the immediate, pressing demand for food, warmth, and another valiant attempt to ignore the pervasive itching. Historians still argue whether medieval people were truly accustomed to these harsh conditions, or if they constantly yearned for something better, something softer. You, for one, are definitely yearning for something softer, like a cloud, or a memory foam mattress. Anything but this. The new day dawns, not with the gentle alarm of your phone, but with the insistent, pervasive cold and the stirring of your medieval housemates. The old woman, whose name you still don't know, manages to coax a meager flame from the embers, and a thin, acrid smoke immediately begins to fill the small space. Your eyes, already gritty from the night, start to sting anew. You push yourself up, your muscles protesting, still stiff from the hard ground. Every movement feels like an effort, a constant reminder that your body isn't built for this. You watch as the woman prepares a simple breakfast, more pottage, thin and watery, served in the same rough wooden bowls. It's a monotonous diet, you realize, one that offers little in the way of variety or culinary delight. Forget your morning coffee or that perfectly toasted bagel. Here, it's just sustenance, a means to fuel the body for the arduous day ahead. A mainstream historical fact is that the medieval diet for peasants was primarily grain-based, supplemented by seasonal vegetables, legumes, and occasionally, small amounts of meat. Protein was scarce, and fresh fruit often limited to what could be gathered or grown locally. Malnutrition, especially for vitamins and minerals, was common. You already feel like you're operating at half capacity, your brain foggy, your limbs heavy to as you eat, or rather, swallow, the thin gruel. You become acutely aware of the constant battle against dirt and disease. The bowl itself feels rough and unwashed, and you can only imagine what unseen microscopic horrors lurk within. You surreptitiously wipe your mouth with the back of your hand, a gesture you wouldn't have dreamed of in your old life. There's no running water here, no gleaming tap to wash away the grime. Any water for drinking or cooking would have to be fetched from the village well or stream, a laborious task. And the idea of hot water for anything other than a special occasion is completely laughable. Your body, meanwhile, is offering its own grim assessment of medieval hygiene. That itch from last night. It's back with a vengeance. You subtly try to scratch your head, then your arm, then your leg, feeling the tiny, invisible inhabitants of your new world making themselves at home. You suppress a shudder of disgust. How do these people cope? Do they just accept it? A quirky tidbit. During the medieval period, it was commonly believed that bathing too frequently could be bad for your health, opening up pores to bad airs and diseases. So, the lack of bathing wasn't just about scarcity of resources, it was also tied to prevailing medical theories, however flawed. You, however, would gladly brave any bad airs for a decent shower right now, or even just a bucket of warm, clean water and a bar of soap. Any soap. You notice the woman uses a corner of her rough apron to wipe the bowls clean after the meal, a perfunctory gesture at best. There's no concept of sterilization, of germ theory. Disease, when it strikes, is seen as God's will, or bad humors, or perhaps the result of a witch's curse. The reality is far more mundane and terrifying. It's the lack of sanitation, the contaminated water, the close proximity to animals, and the constant presence of vermin. You can almost feel the invisible army of bacteria swirling around you, just waiting for an opportunity. Historians still argue whether the widespread belief in supernatural causes for illness hindered or simply coexisted with rudimentary medical practices of the time. You, personally, wouldn't put much faith in either. As the morning progresses, the full extent of medieval health challenges becomes apparent. You observe the villagers. Many show signs of chronic illness. Their teeth are often rotten or missing, their skin marred by scars, sores, and unexplained rashes. Children, especially, seem vulnerable, with runny noses, persistent coughs, and eyes that often appear dull and listless. Infant mortality rates were astronomically high in the Middle Ages, a brutal reality that meant many parents would lose several children before one survived to adulthood. It's a stark, heartbreaking contrast to modern medicine, where even a common cold is usually a minor inconvenience. Here, a simple infection could be a death sentence. You hear the hacking coughs from neighboring huts, the cries of a sick child that no one seems able to comfort. You realize that a trip to the doctor, a quick prescription for antibiotics, is simply not an option. Medieval medicine relied on a combination of herbal remedies, bloodletting, which often made things worse, and superstitious rituals. Barbers, often doubled as surgeons, performing crude amputations or pulling teeth with terrifyingly basic tools. The thought makes you wince. Your own teeth, thanks to decades of fluoride and regular dental checkups, feel like a fragile, precious commodity. You try not to think about what would happen if you got a cavity. You notice a man limping heavily, his leg wrapped in dirty rags, likely from an untreated injury that has festered. Another woman has a large, angry boil on her neck. It's a world where pain and discomfort are constant companions, where minor ailments can quickly escalate into life-threatening conditions. The human body, you realize, is incredibly resilient, but even it has its limits. And in this world, those limits are tested daily. You find yourself instinctively touching your own body, checking for bumps, bruises, anything that might be the precursor to a medieval medical nightmare. You also realize you probably don't have enough medieval currency to pay for a visit to the local barber surgeon, even if you wanted to, which you definitely don't. The sun finally breaks through the clouds, casting weak, pale light into the hovel. The air inside seems to shimmer with dust motes and lingering smoke. You can feel the cold radiating up from the earth floor, seeping into your very bones. There's no central heating, no insulated walls, just thin layers of wattle and daub, doing their best against the elements. You shiver, despite the pottage in your stomach. The cold is a constant, grinding presence, making every movement a minor battle. You find yourself longing for the simple pleasure of a warm, clean bed, a fresh change of clothes, and the complete absence of itching. These mundane comforts, once so utterly unremarkable, now loom as unattainable luxuries. You look at your medieval family, the quiet old woman, the stoic man, the perpetually grubby child, and wonder if they ever dream of such things. Or if, for them, this harsh, unyielding existence is simply all they've ever known and all they expect to know. Historians still argue whether medieval people experienced happiness and contentment in the same way modern people do, given the Pervasive hardships. You, personally, are leaning towards the idea that happiness might have been a bit harder to come by, especially when you're constantly itching. As the day begins to fully awaken outside, you realize that this struggle for basic comfort and cleanliness will be an ongoing, relentless battle. It's not just about surviving. It's about enduring the constant assault on your senses, your body, and your modern sensibilities. And the thought of another night on the hard, cold ground, with the persistent itch and the stifling smoke, fills you with a profound sense of dread. But there's no escape, no easy way out. Just another day in your uninvited medieval adventure. And you haven't even thought about brushing your teeth. Or, not brushing your teeth. The morning ritual of thin pottage and battling the chill eventually gives way to the day's demands. Your newfound family, the stoic man, the practical old woman, and the perpetually quiet child, begin to move with purpose. The man heads out, presumably to the fields, carrying a crude digging tool. The old woman starts to gather bundles of straw and kindling, preparing for more domestic tasks. You, meanwhile, are left with an awkward sense of uselessness. What exactly is your role here? Do you just exist? As you step outside the hovel again, the smells of the village are even more pronounced under the morning sun. The air, though still carrying the scent of wood smoke and damp earth, is now infused with the unmistakable tang of uncollected refuse. You notice piles of household waste scattered near the edges of the dwellings, a mix of food scraps, animal droppings, and other unidentifiable detritus. There's no concept of a rubbish bin, let alone a recycling program. Everything simply accumulates, slowly decaying, attracting flies and vermin. Your nose wrinkles instinctively, a futile gesture. You're going to have to get used to this, or spend your entire medieval existence holding your breath. The paths between the huts are churned to mud, and you navigate them with extreme caution, trying to avoid stepping in anything particularly unpleasant. You glance down at your feet, encased in their rough leather shoes, and feel a pang of longing for waterproof boots, or even just clean socks. The sheer, overwhelming lack of sanitation is a constant presence, a silent, unseen opponent. In this new life, a mainstream historical fact is that medieval towns and villages, with very few exceptions, had no organized waste disposal or sewerage systems. Human and animal waste, along with other refuse, was often simply thrown into the streets or collected in cesspits, contributing directly to the spread of disease. You suddenly understand why plagues were such a regular feature of medieval life. It's like living in a giant, open-air petri dish. You notice a peculiar detail as you walk, the relative absence of privies or latrines. People seem to just go where they can, behind a bush, in a quiet corner of the village, or even, alarmingly, into the stream that serves as a water source. Your stomach churns. You flash back to your modern bathroom, with its gleaming porcelain and powerful flush, and it feels like an impossibly advanced piece of technology. Here, the very basic human need for sanitation is met with a casual disregard that would send a modern public health inspector into a full-blown panic attack. And you, dear listener, are now part of this fragrant ecosystem. Your persistent itch, a constant reminder of your unwelcome companions, demands your attention. You try to surreptitiously scratch your scalp, then your arm, then your side, feeling the maddening crawl of tiny legs. You've definitely got something. Probably multiple somethings. You recall a quirky tidbit. Medieval people, even the upper classes, routinely dealt with fleas and lice. Sometimes, they even carried flea furs, or small pieces of animal fur to attract the fleas away from their bodies. The image of someone deliberately carrying a flea magnet is both disgusting and morbidly fascinating. You consider if there's a medieval equivalent of a flea market where you could acquire one, then decide against it. You have enough problems without actively attracting more parasites. As you wander, you spot a pig rooting around near one of the huts, its snout buried in the mud, snuffling at something unseen. This close proximity of animals to living quarters, while practical for a self-sufficient village, also means a constant flow of animal waste and associated germs. The air practically hums with unseen bacteria. Historians still argue whether medieval people understood the connection between poor sanitation and disease, or if their explanations remained primarily spiritual or humoral. balancing bodily fluids. You, however, are now getting a very visceral, hands-on lesson in germ theory, and it's making you want to scrub yourself with industrial-strength disinfectant. The general impression of the village is one of pervasive dirt. Clothes are stained and patched, hands and faces are perpetually grimy, and even the air itself seems thick with dust and soot. You touch your own face, and your fingers come away with a greasy, unidentifiable residue. It's a level of grime that goes beyond needing a shower. It feels like it's seeped into your very pores, a permanent film. Your modern aversion to dirt feels almost quaint in this context. Here, dirt isn't something to be avoided. It's simply a fact of life, an omnipresent companion. You notice the complete absence of anything resembling a latrine or dedicated waste pit that isn't just a general area. The concept of separating human waste from living spaces, or even from water sources, seems entirely foreign. You suddenly feel a profound sense of gratitude for modern plumbing, for flush toilets, for sewage treatment plants. These invisible infrastructures, which you've always taken for granted, are suddenly revealed as monumental achievements, literally life-saving technologies. Without them, you're back to a world where a bad meal could send you to an early grave via dysentery. And, let's be honest, most of the meals here qualify as bad. The sound of children playing nearby reminds you that this is their normal. They roll in the dirt, their hands and faces smeared with grime, seemingly oblivious to the filth that surrounds them. They don't know any different. They've never experienced the crisp scent of laundry detergent or the soothing warmth of a clean bath. This is their baseline, their normal. And you, a bewildered traveler from a future of pristine surfaces and antibacterial wipes, are now forced to adapt. Or, more likely, constantly squirm with discomfort as the morning wears on. The sun manages to peek out more consistently, highlighting the particles dancing in the air within the hovel. Dust, smoke, and who knows what else. Every breath feels heavier, thicker. You can feel the residue coating your tongue, settling in your throat. Your nose is constantly irritated, and you find yourself sneezing more than usual. This isn't just unpleasant, it's actively unhealthy. You remember dimly something about medieval cities being notoriously unhygienic, but a rural village, you realize, isn't much better when it comes to basic sanitation. The lack of concentrated population might slightly reduce the rapid spread of some diseases, but the fundamental issues of waste and water contamination remain. You consider the implications of living like this indefinitely. The constant exposure to pathogens, the lack of medical care, the perpetual grime. Your modern immune system, coddled by vaccinations and antibiotics, feels terribly unprepared for this biological onslaught. You find yourself hoping you received all your childhood vaccinations, and then some. Because here, a simple cut could lead to a fatal infection, a stomach bug could dehydrate you into oblivion, and a bad flu could be the end. This isn't just a historical immersion, it's a constant battle for biological survival. And you're severely outmatched as the days begin to blur into a monotonous cycle of cold, hunger, and persistent itching. You become acutely aware of the clothing you're forced to wear. Your modern wardrobe, filled with breathable fabrics, stretchy denim, and fashionable accessories, feels like a distant, impossible dream. Here, your attire is dictated by necessity, material availability, and the rigid social codes of the time. You're essentially wearing a peasant uniform, a coarse woolen tunic, perhaps a rough linen undergarment if you're lucky, and ill-fitting leather shoes. No zippers, no buttons beyond simple toggles, just laces and pins. Getting dressed is less about style and more about survival. The wool of your tunic, while offering some warmth, is scratchy against your skin. It sheds fibers, collects dust, and somehow manages to amplify every single itch you have. You try to smooth it down, but it seems to have a mind of its own, refusing to sit neatly. You also realize, with a grimace, that washing these clothes would be a monumental task, involving cold water, harsh lye, and a lot of vigorous beating against rocks. And given the general lack of hygiene, there's no guarantee they'd ever truly be clean. The smell of wood smoke and old sweat is permanently embedded in the fibers. You miss your laundry machine with a passion you never knew you possessed. You observe the other villagers' clothing. Everyone is dressed similarly, varying only slightly in the quality of the fabric or the presence of a few simple patches. Children wear scaled-down versions of adult clothes, often handed down until they practically fall apart. The colors are muted, earthy tones, browns, grays, undyed wool, perhaps some dull blues or greens from basic plant dyes. There's no vibrant spectrum of colors you're used to seeing on the street today. Bright dyes were expensive and required specialized knowledge, reserved for the very wealthy or for ceremonial garments. A mainstream historical fact is that sumptuary laws existed in many medieval societies, dictating what various social classes were allowed to wear, eat, and even own, reinforcing the strict hierarchy. So, no rocking up in a silk tunic if you're a peasant, even if you could somehow acquire one. You'd probably get arrested, or worse, beaten for stepping out of line. You notice how everyone's clothes are perpetually stained with mud, soot, and various unidentifiable substances. There's no escaping the grime. Even if you tried to keep yourself clean, your environment would conspire against you. The sheer practicality of their clothing is evident. Tunics are loose-fitting, allowing for movement during labor. Trousers, or hosen, are simple, tied at the waist, and often patched many times over. Footwear is basic, just sturdy leather that offers minimal protection against the cold and wet. You suddenly appreciate the complex engineering of your sneakers, with their arch support and shock absorption. Here, walking is an exercise in pain management. The lack of pockets is a constant minor annoyance. Where do people keep their few possessions? A small pouch tied to the belt seems to be the answer, but it's hardly practical for carrying your entire life. No phone, no wallet, no keys. Just you, your scratchy clothes, and whatever you can clutch in your hands. You realize how much you rely on pockets in your daily life, how much they streamline your interactions with the world. Here, everything is clunky. Manual.as. You spend more time with your medieval family. You notice the ingenuity, born of necessity, in repairing clothes. Patches aren't just functional, they're almost a form of art. A hole isn't discarded, it's meticulously mended, often with contrasting fabric, creating a patchwork quilt effect. Fabric itself is too valuable to waste. A quirky tidbit about medieval fashion is that even torn or worn-out garments would be repurposed, perhaps becoming rags, padding, or even components for other crafts. Nothing went to waste. You wonder if your old holey socks would be considered a treasure here. Probably. The constant dampness and cold also make proper drying of clothes a challenge. Without central heating or modern dryers, garments would often be air-dried near the hearth, absorbing even more smoke. This perpetuates the smell and the dampness, creating a cycle of mild discomfort. You find yourself constantly trying to rub warmth into your hands and feet, which always feel cold, even indoors. The thought of a heated towel rail brings tears to your eyes. You observe the minimal use of jewelry or personal adornments among the peasants. A simple wooden bead necklace, perhaps a crude metal ring, but nothing elaborate. Such items were often indicative of status, and for the common folk, displaying wealth could be dangerous, attracting unwanted attention or even accusations of witchcraft. So no bling here, just a quiet, functional existence. Historians still argue whether medieval peasants truly had a sense of individual identity or if their lives were primarily defined by their roles within the community and their feudal obligations. You, in your scratchy tunic, feel decidedly less like an individual and more like a generic unit of labor. Your hair, meanwhile, is becoming an unmanageable mess. Without shampoo or a proper comb, it's matted and tangled, attracting even more of those persistent, unwelcome guests. You watch the other women, their hair often braided tightly or covered with simple veils or caps. It's practical, keeping the hair out of the way during work and offering some protection from the elements. You attempt to mimic their simple hairstyles, struggling with your unruly modern locks. It's a losing battle. You suddenly understand why head coverings were so common, not just for modesty, but for sanity, the simple act of getting dressed. In the morning, which used to be a quick, almost unconscious routine, is now a deliberate, uncomfortable process. You pull on the rough tunic, feeling the scratchy wool against your skin, knowing that by the end of the day, it will be even dirtier, damper, and probably even itchier. There's no escaping it. This isn't just clothing, It's a second skin, a constant reminder of your new, unvarnished reality. And every single fiber of that reality screams for a hot shower, a clean towel, and the soothing embrace of soft, freshly laundered pajamas. But for now, you'll just have to make do with the medieval uniform and the ever-present, maddening itch as the days unfold, each one a stark, sensory-rich tableau of medieval life. You begin to grasp the intricate rhythms of the village. It's a self-contained world, largely isolated, where every individual plays a vital role in the collective survival. From your vantage point, observing from the periphery, you start to piece together the daily routines, the unspoken rules, and the subtle interactions that govern this close-knit community. This isn't like your old neighborhood, where people might live next door for years and barely exchange a nod. Here, everyone knows everyone, and everyone's fate is intertwined. The village itself is a cluster of perhaps a dozen or two hovels, all built in a similar wattle and daub style, clustered around a central green or open space. A small, rudimentary track, churned to mud, serves as the main thoroughfare. Beyond the hovels stretch the arable fields, where the bulk of the village's labor, and indeed its survival, is focused. These fields are not individually owned by the peasants. Rather, they are part of the lord's domain, or common lands, worked collectively or in strips allocated for a season. A mainstream historical fact is that the open field system was a common agricultural practice in medieval Europe, where large fields were divided into unfenced strips, often worked by different peasant families. This system, while seemingly inefficient, by modern standards, facilitated shared resources and minimized risk for individual families in case of crop failure. Imagine trying to explain property lines to someone who only understands this is our shared patch of dirt. You observe the sheer physical labor involved in farming. Men, women, and even older children spend their days toiling in the fields, often from dawn till dusk. They use simple, rudimentary tools, wooden plows pulled by oxen, hand sickles for harvesting, flails for threshing grain. There are no tractors, no combine harvesters, not even a single automated device. Every ounce of food consumed is the direct result of backbreaking, sweat-inducing effort. You realize that your occasional workout at the gym, with its air conditioning and motivational music, is laughable in comparison to the sheer, unyielding demand of medieval agriculture. Your muscles ache just watching them. The seasons dictate everything. Spring brings the arduous task of plowing and sowing. Summer means weeding and tending the growing crops. Autumn is the frenetic, crucial time of harvest, a period of intense labor and anxiety, as the success of the year's food supply hinges on the weather and the yield. Winter, though a period of reduced outdoor labor, brings its own challenges: the biting cold, the scarcity of fresh food, and the constant threat of illness. There's no concept of a 9-to-5 job here. Work is simply life, inextricably linked to the cycles of nature. A quirky tidbit about medieval farming is the three-field system, where land was rotated, with one field growing a winter crop, another a spring crop, and the third left fallow, unplanted, to recover its nutrients. This was an advanced agricultural technique for its time, but still relied entirely on manual labor and animal power. The village is not just a collection of homes. It's an economic unit. You see signs of other crafts besides farming. The distant clang of the blacksmith's hammer, the smell of wood smoke from a small kiln where someone might be making pottery. Perhaps a miller grinds the grain for everyone, taking a portion as payment. This self-sufficiency means that most people rarely travel beyond their immediate vicinity. The world beyond the next hill is largely unknown, potentially dangerous, and rarely visited. Your concept of global travel and instant communication is so utterly alien, it's almost comical. You also begin to notice the social fabric of the village. Despite the harshness, there's a sense of community, a reliance on each other. If a family falls ill, neighbors might step in to help with the harvest. If a hovel needs repair, others would lend a hand. This mutual aid is not out of pure altruism. It's a necessity. In a world with no social safety nets, no insurance, and no government assistance, the community is your only lifeline. You realize how much your old life relied on unseen systems of support, from healthcare to public services. Here, it's just the people around you, and a prayer. Children, as you observed earlier, are integrated into village life from a very young age. They're not sequestered in schools, unless they're destined for the church or nobility. Instead, they learn by doing, mimicking their parents and older siblings, gradually taking on more responsibilities. A little girl might be sent to gather kindling, a boy to herd geese. Play is often a form of preparation for adult tasks, though you do see moments of pure, unadulterated childish joy, which warms your otherwise chilled heart. The church, even. If there isn't a physical building within the village itself, there might be a small chapel, or the villagers travel to a larger parish church nearby, looms large in their lives. Religion provides solace, explanation, and a framework for morality. Daily life is punctuated by prayers, saints' days, and the fear of divine retribution. You see people crossing themselves, bowing their heads in quiet reverence. This is a world where God's presence is felt in every sunrise and every crop failure. Historians still argue whether medieval people truly lived in constant fear of damnation, or if their faith provided more comfort and meaning in their arduous lives. You, personally, feel a bit of both. You're certainly praying for a hot shower. You've already seen glimpses of the church's influence. The occasional muttered prayer, the simple cross gesture, the general reverence. But its power goes far beyond just spiritual guidance. The church is arguably the most powerful institution in the medieval world, wielding immense spiritual, political, and economic authority. It dictates morality, defines sin, and offers the promise of salvation or the terrifying threat of eternal damnation. For the peasants, daily life is deeply interwoven with religious observance. Sundays are days of rest and mandatory attendance at Mass, often in a nearby parish church if the village doesn't have its own chapel. Saints' days are celebrated, offering a brief respite from labor and an opportunity for communal festivity, often involving more food than usual. A mainstream historical fact is that the Catholic Church was the dominant religious institution in Western Europe during the Middle Ages, profoundly influencing almost every aspect of life, from governance to education to daily morality. It was the universal authority. You notice the villagers' deeply ingrained piety. They attribute good harvests to God's grace and bad ones to divine displeasure or punishment for sins. When sickness strikes, prayers are offered, saints are invoked, and religious relics might be sought out. Life is uncertain, brutal, and often short, and the promise of a better afterlife provides immense solace and meaning. You, with your secular modern upbringing, find this level of unquestioning faith both fascinating and unsettling. It's hard to imagine living in a world where every single event, from a good rain to a child's death, is interpreted through a purely religious lens. But alongside formal religious belief, there's a vibrant, pervasive world of folklore and superstition. These aren't necessarily contradictory to Christian belief. Often, they coexist, layered over each other like ancient strata. People believe in pixies, goblins, and fairies that inhabit the woods and streams, capable of both mischief and minor aid. Charms are worn to ward off evil spirits, and rituals are performed to ensure fertility of the land or protection of livestock. You hear hushed whispers about local wise women who brew herbal remedies, but who are also suspected of knowing other things, perhaps even practicing a bit of benign magic. A quirky tidbit is the belief in changelings, that fairies might steal a healthy human baby and replace it with a sickly or ill-favored fairy child. This belief sometimes tragically explained infant mortality or birth defects in a time of no medical understanding. You try not to look too long at the quiet child in your hovel, just in case. You see subtle signs of these beliefs everywhere. A horseshoe nailed above a doorway for luck. A sprig of rowan branch tied to an animal's stall to protect it from disease. Certain days of the week or month are considered lucky or unlucky for starting new ventures. The phases of the moon influence planting and harvesting. The natural world, rather than being a neutral entity to be conquered and exploited, is alive with unseen forces, both benevolent and malevolent. This creates a sense of constant vigilance, a need to appease, protect, and observe the subtle signs of the universe. Historians still argue whether medieval folklore represented a continuation of pagan traditions or if it developed organically within a Christian framework as a way to understand the unexplained. You, personally, just hope they don't blame you for a bad harvest. The fear of witchcraft is also very real and palpable. If something truly inexplicable or disastrous happens, a sudden blight on the crops, a mysterious illness that sweeps through the village, suspicion can quickly fall on an outsider or someone deemed different. The consequences for being accused of witchcraft are dire, often involving trial by ordeal and, if found guilty, execution. You realize, with a chilling sensation, that your own unfamiliarity, your strange demeanor, and your inability to speak their language could easily make you a target of such suspicion. You try to blend in even more, to appear as unremarkable as possible. Suddenly, being invisible sounds like a superpower. You hear stories, told in hushed tones around the evening fire, about encounters with forest spirits, about omens and portents. An unusually bright comet could signify war or plague. A flock of crows flying in a particular direction might signal death. These aren't just quaint tales. They are lived realities, shaping people's decisions and anxieties. It's a world where the veil between the mundane and the magical is thin, easily pierced by fear or hope. Your rational, scientific mind struggles to reconcile with this deep-seated belief system, but you know that openly scoffing at it would be incredibly foolish and possibly dangerous. The constant interplay between the divine and the folkloric means that life is lived with a constant awareness of higher powers. Every thunderstorm, every sunrise, every blossoming plant carries a deeper meaning. You're reminded of your own world's reliance on science and reason to explain phenomena. Here, the explanation is often simpler, more spiritual, and deeply comforting to those who believe, and terrifying to those who don't. As you drift off to sleep in the smoky hovel, the faint glow of the embers paints dancing shadows on the walls, transforming familiar shapes into unsettling specters. The sounds of the night, the hoot of an owl, the rustle of leaves, the distant baying of a dog, take on a new, almost mystical quality. You can almost feel the presence of unseen forces in the air, a testament to the pervasive nature of medieval belief. And for a moment, just a moment, your modern skepticism wavers. Because in a world where explanations are scarce and life is so uncertain, perhaps a little magic or a lot of faith is simply a necessity. You just hope none of the fairies try to swap you for a changeling. You're already quite enough of a changeling as it is. The rhythmic churn of village life continues, a relentless cycle of sunrise, labor, and sleep. You've come to understand the unspoken social rules, the grind of farming, and the pervasive spiritual beliefs. But as you continue to exist in this raw, unvarnished world, you become acutely aware of another, far more terrifying aspect of medieval society: the brutal and often arbitrary nature of law and order. Forget your modern concepts of due process, legal representation, or appeals courts. Here, justice is swift, rough, and frequently lethal. You soon realize that what little formal law exists stems directly from the Lord's authority. He is the ultimate arbiter, his word effectively law within his manor. He has his own manorial court, where disputes are settled, minor offenses judged, and fines levied. This isn't a grand courtroom with a robed judge. It's likely held in his manor house, or even outdoors, with the lord or his bailiff presiding. There are no written laws for the peasants to consult, only custom and the lord's interpretation. A mainstream historical fact is that manorial courts were crucial for administering justice at the local level, handling everything from petty theft and assaults to disputes over land and minor breaches of contract. For the vast majority of people, this was their only experience of the legal system. You observe an incident one morning. A young man is brought before the bailiff, accused of stealing a handful of grain from the lord's granary. The evidence seems circumstantial, based on rumor and a suspicious bulge in his tunic. There's no trial by jury, no opportunity for the accused to present a strong defense. The bailiff listens to the accusations, perhaps questions a witness or two, and then, with chilling efficiency, pronounces judgment. The penalty: a public flogging, severe enough to leave angry red welts across the young man's back. A brutal reminder to everyone of the Lord's power and the cost of defiance. Your stomach clenches, and you look away, sickened. This isn't justice. It's a display of power, designed to instill fear and maintain control. The concept of innocent until proven guilty is practically non-existent. If you're accused, you're often assumed to be guilty, and proving your innocence is incredibly difficult, especially without a common language. Methods of proof can be bizarre and terrifying. You recall hearing about trial by ordeal. For example, the accused might have to pick up a red-hot iron bar or plunge their hand into boiling water. If the wound healed cleanly, it was considered proof of innocence, as God had intervened. If it festered, you were guilty. A quirky tidbit is the ordeal by water, where an accused person was thrown into a body of water. If they floated, they were guilty, as the pure water rejected them. And if they sank, they were innocent, though often drowned in the process. You realize how utterly terrifying it would be to rely on such a capricious, agonizing system to prove your innocence. You'd probably just confess to everything. For more serious crimes, like murder or major theft, the Lord might hand you over to the royal courts. But even there, justice is far from equitable. Punishment is often swift and harsh. Fines are common for minor infractions, but for anything perceived as a serious challenge to authority or property, the penalties escalate quickly. Mutilation, loss of a hand, an eye, branding, or, most commonly, execution by hanging. Public executions were a common spectacle, serving as a brutal deterrent. The very air around you seems to hum with the unspoken threat of violence, a constant reminder of the fragility of life and the absolute power of the ruling class. Historians still argue whether the severity of medieval punishments was primarily a reflection of their harsh society, or if it was an effective deterrent in a world without prisons as we know them. You, for one, are hoping to avoid becoming a data point in that debate. There's no police force as you understand it. Law enforcement is largely a communal responsibility. Villagers are expected to raise the hue and cry if a crime is committed, meaning they must alert their neighbors and pursue the suspect. If they fail to do so, the entire village could be fined. This encourages a collective vigilance, but also fosters a climate of suspicion and mutual accusation. You imagine trying to explain the concept of 911 to these people. They'd probably just stare at you, confused, then go back to chasing chickens. You notice the lack of strong communal bonds in the face of accusation. While villagers might help each other with daily tasks, when someone is accused of a crime, there's often a subtle withdrawal, a fear of being tainted by association. Your modern sense of solidarity, of standing up for the wrongly accused, feels out of place here. Survival often means looking out for yourself and your immediate family, even if it means turning a blind eye to someone else's misfortune. The threat of outlawry is also very real. If you commit a serious crime and manage to escape capture, you might be declared an outlaw, meaning you lose all legal protection. Anyone can kill you without consequence, and you become an outcast, forced to live in the wilderness, perpetually hunted. This is not the romanticized Robin Hood version. It's a grim, lonely existence that usually ends quickly. Even disputes between villagers, minor disagreements over boundaries or debts, are handled in the Lord's court. There's no mediation, no complex legal arguments. The goal is simply to resolve the issue quickly and maintain order, often with a fine as the primary solution. This ensures a steady income for the Lord, even as it grinds down the peasants as night falls and you retreat to your smoky hovel. The sounds of the village are quiet, but the lingering fear of arbitrary justice is a palpable presence. You lie awake, listening to the unfamiliar sounds, grateful for the rough fabric of your tunic, your own unbroken limbs. Every day here is a test of survival, not just against hunger and cold, but against a system that can, at any moment, mete out devastating punishment for reasons you might not even comprehend. And in this world, where there are no lawyers, no human rights, and no true recourse, your greatest defense is simply to remain unnoticed, to disappear into the backdrop of peasant life. A quiet, terrifying prayer for obscurity, the oppressive weight of the feudal system, and the chilling reality of medieval justice are constant companions in your new life. But even in this confined, difficult existence, the need to interact with the wider world, however sparingly, occasionally arises. This means travel, a concept that in your modern life conjures images of comfortable seats, speedy vehicles, and convenient navigation. Here, It is an endeavor fraught with peril, discomfort, and uncertainty. You notice that villagers rarely leave the immediate vicinity of their manor. Their world is defined by the fields they work, the stream they draw water from, and the lord's manor house a short walk away. Any journey beyond this familiar radius is a significant event, undertaken only out of necessity. Perhaps a visit to a larger market town for goods not produced locally, or a pilgrimage to a holy shrine, or, for the unfortunate few, a summons to a distant court. The concept of a leisure trip, a vacation, is utterly alien. Travel is a chore, a risk, and a test of endurance. One day, you observe preparations for a journey. One of the village men, perhaps a slightly more prosperous peasant or a designated messenger, is preparing to take a cart to a nearby market town. The cart is a simple, two-wheeled affair, pulled by a sturdy ox. It has no suspension, no comfortable seating, just rough wooden boards. The journey, even to a town only a few miles away, could take hours, if not a full day, over unpaved, often muddy tracks. You imagine the jarring, bone-rattling ride and instantly feel a twinge in your lower back. Your body, accustomed to smooth asphalt and ergonomic car seats, is not prepared for medieval transit. A mainstream historical fact is that medieval roads were generally in very poor condition, often little more than widened paths, making travel slow, arduous, and highly dependent on weather conditions. Forget Google Maps. Here, you rely on memory and vague directions from people who haven't seen the next village in years. The dangers of travel are numerous and immediate. Banditry is a constant threat. Outlaws, desperate for food or plunder, might lurk in forests or along isolated stretches of road. A solo traveler, especially one carrying anything of value, is an easy target. Even within a group, vigilance is key. You see the man preparing for the journey openly carrying a stout wooden club, a simple but effective deterrent. You realize that your own survival instinct, honed by modern comforts, would need a significant upgrade to navigate such perils. No phone to call for help, no police patrol. Just you and your blunt object. Beyond human threats, there are the dangers of the natural world. Wild animals, wolves, bears, even wild boar, are more common in the still vast forests. Crossing swollen rivers without proper bridges, navigating treacherous bogs, or simply getting lost in unfamiliar terrain are all real possibilities. The weather, always a factor, can turn a simple track into an impassable quagmire, stranding travelers. For days, you realize that packing light is not a choice. It's a necessity, as every extra pound makes the journey harder and slower. You miss your rolling suitcase with its perfectly organized compartments. Accommodation along the way is primitive at best. There are no roadside motels or friendly service stations. If you're lucky, you might find a monastery or a hospitable inn in a larger town, offering a straw bed and a simple meal for a small fee. More likely, you'd be sleeping rough, perhaps under a tree or in a farmer's barn, exposed to the elements and the critters. The idea of a good night's sleep on a long journey is a fantasy. A quirky tidbit about medieval travel is the concept of guest right, where a traveler could often expect a night's hospitality from a peasant family, especially in isolated areas. This was a necessity, as formal inns were rare outside of major routes and towns. You just hope they don't ask you to contribute to the pottage. You're already struggling with the chewing. Navigation is rudimentary. There are no road signs, no detailed maps. Journeys rely on local knowledge, landmarks like a distinctive tree or a bend in a river, and the sun's position. Getting lost is a very real possibility, and a lost traveler could easily succumb to exposure, hunger, or encounter something far worse. The very concept of knowing where you are at all times, thanks to GPS, is a luxury you never appreciated until now. Here, the world feels vast, unknown, and potentially hostile. Historians still argue whether medieval people had a greater intuitive sense of direction than modern humans due to their constant reliance on natural cues, or if they were just as prone to getting lost. You're betting on just as prone. Even a journey within the manor, say to the Lord's manor house for a summons, carries its own social risks. It's a formal setting, requiring appropriate deference and behavior. Your lack of understanding of social etiquette could lead to unintended offense, And given the harshness of medieval justice, that's a risk you definitely don't want to take. You try to mimic the villagers' deferential posture, their quiet movements, hoping to blend into the background. It's like an elaborate, high-stakes game of charades, where the stakes are your continued existence. As you watch the man set off on his ox cart, a cloud of dust, and the persistent lowing of the animal accompanying him, you feel a profound sense of isolation. You are literally and figuratively stuck. The world beyond this small village is a vast, dangerous unknown, and your own survival is precarious enough within its familiar confines. The thought of venturing out, of facing the threats of the open road, fills you with a chilling dread. You return to the hovel, the smells of smoke and damp earth a grim comfort, a familiar prison. At least here, you know the dangers. Out there, on the road, anything could happen. And anything, in medieval times, usually isn't good. You suddenly appreciate that even a bad commute in your old life was a luxury, a testament to a world where comfort and safety were prioritized over raw survival. Having glimpsed the arduous reality of travel and the contained world of the village, your perspective shifts slightly when the opportunity arises to visit a nearby market town. This isn't a leisure outing, of course. It's a necessity, as the village cannot produce every single thing it needs. Accompanying your medieval family member, perhaps the same man who ventured out before, or an older woman, you brace yourself for the journey, which, while short by modern standards, feels like an epic quest. The bone-jarring ride-in. The ox cart confirms all your fears about medieval suspension, leaving you feeling thoroughly jostled and slightly nauseous. As you approach the town, the air changes. The pervasive scent of wood smoke and dung from the village is now layered with a dozen new aromas: baking bread, curing hides, the metallic tang of a blacksmith's forge, and the distinct, somewhat unpleasant odor of a large crowd of unwashed bodies. The sounds intensify as well, rising from the relatively quiet hum of the village to a bustling cacophony of human voices, animal noises, and the rhythmic clatter of crafts being plied. You hear vendors shouting, children crying, dogs barking, and the general clamor of commerce. It's an overwhelming assault on your senses, a stark contrast to the quiet monotony of your peasant life. The town itself is a maze of narrow, winding streets, many unpaved and thick with mud and refuse. Buildings are packed tightly together, their upper stories often jutting out over the street, casting perpetual shadows. Many are half-timbered, with whitewashed wattle and daub walls and thatched or tiled roofs. There's a distinct feeling of claustrophobia, of being hemmed in by the sheer density of human habitation. You instinctively reach for your phone, wanting to take a picture of this utterly foreign scene, before remembering that such a device is an impossibility here. A mainstream historical fact is that medieval towns were typically compact and densely populated, enclosed by defensive walls, if large enough, with narrow, unhygienic streets. Space was at a premium, and sanitation was an afterthought. You notice the same lack of proper waste disposal you observed in the village, only amplified by the sheer number of people. It's a symphony of smells, and none of them are particularly pleasant. The market square is the town's beating heart. It's a vibrant, chaotic hub of activity. Stalls are set up haphazardly, piled high with goods, sacks of grain, bundles of wool, live chickens, rough pottery, simple tools, and perhaps a few meager fresh vegetables. Merchants, artisans, and peasants from surrounding villages haggle over prices, their voices rising and falling in a constant drone. You see people bartering, exchanging goods directly as coin currency, while present isn't always available or preferred for small transactions. Your experience with online shopping and credit cards feels absurdly distant. Here, it's all about direct interaction, a keen eye for quality, and a sharp tongue for negotiation. You observe the different types of people. Peasants like yourself, distinguished by their simpler clothing and worn faces. Townspeople, perhaps, slightly better dressed, involved in various trades, a baker, a weaver, a cobbler. There are also members of the merchant class, often more elaborately dressed, their faces shrewd, their hands relatively soft. And occasionally, you spot a knight or a noble, easily identifiable by their finer clothes, their swagger, and perhaps a retinue of armed guards. Their presence creates a ripple of deference among the common folk. The social hierarchy, which felt somewhat abstract in the village, is glaringly evident here, painted in the different qualities of fabric and the attitudes of passers-by. Point 1. Of the most striking features of the town is the presence of various crafts and trades. You pass by a blacksmith's forge, sparks flying as a brawny man hammers hot iron. Further on, you see a weaver's shop, the rhythmic clack-clack-clack of a loom echoing from within. There are tanners, and the smell of raw hides and tanning solutions is pungent and unforgettable. This is where goods are produced, where the raw materials from the countryside are transformed into essential items. A quirky tidbit about medieval trades is the strength of guilds, associations of craftsmen or merchants that controlled training, quality, and prices within their specific trade. If you wanted to be a successful shoemaker, you had to be part of the shoemaker's guild, often starting as an apprentice for many years. So, no self-taught YouTube entrepreneurship here. It was all about the guild. You also notice the presence of the church in a more prominent way than in your small village. A large stone church dominates the town center, its bell tower rising above the lower buildings. Its architecture, even rudimentary, speaks of permanence and authority. People stop to cross themselves as they pass, and the faint scent of incense hangs in the air near its doors. It serves as a reminder that even in the bustle of commerce, the spiritual realm is never far from people's minds. As you navigate the crowded streets, you're struck by the sheer lack of personal space. People jostle past each other, their bodies brushing, their breath mingling in the cold air. The noise level is constant, and the smells are overwhelming. Your senses, accustomed to the curated environments of modern life, feel assaulted. You find yourself trying to stay close to your family member, relying on their familiarity with this chaotic environment. You realize how much you miss the quiet, ordered efficiency of a modern supermarket. No crowds, no strange smells, just perfectly packaged goods and self-checkout. The pace of life in the town, while faster than the village, is still slower than your old reality. Decisions are made face-to-face, transactions take time, and information travels only as fast as a person or a letter. There's no instant gratification, no quick delivery. Patience is a virtue born out of necessity. You mentally try to estimate how long it would take to get a simple message to a neighboring town, and the answer is hours, if not days, fraught with danger. Historians still argue whether medieval towns fostered a greater sense of individual freedom compared to rural manners, even with their crowded conditions and guild restrictions. For you, the sheer number of people offers a different kind of anonymity, a brief escape from the constant scrutiny of village life. Even if it brings its own set of challenges. As the sun begins to dip, the market starts to wind down. Vendors pack up their wares, and the crowd thins. The journey back to the village is even more arduous, the cold deepening, the fatigue settling deep in your bones. You carry a few meager purchases, a new, slightly less scratchy piece of linen, perhaps a small, crude tool. They are small triumphs, hard-won in a world that gives nothing easily. As you finally stumble back into your smoky hovel, the pervasive dirt and familiar discomfort feel almost like a welcome embrace. The town was a glimpse into a slightly larger world, but it was also a stark reminder of the harsh realities of medieval life and the precariousness of your own existence within it. And you're pretty sure you picked up some new fleas. The brief, chaotic foray into the market town offered a wider lens on medieval society, highlighting the various strata of its people and the bustle of its commerce. But as you retreat once more into the quiet rhythms of village life, a fundamental truth asserts itself. Education and literacy are not universal rights, but rare privileges, almost entirely absent from your new, peasant reality. Your own mind, shaped by decades of readily available information, feels like a library without books, a computer without power. You've observed that no one in your immediate family unit seems to read or write. Daily life here revolves around oral tradition, practical skills passed down through generations, and direct observation. There are no books in the hovel, no scrolls, not even a rudimentary slate. Knowledge is experiential, learned through doing, listening, and mimicking. The idea of sitting down to read a novel, or even a newspaper, feels as fantastical as flying to the moon. A mainstream historical fact is that literacy rates in medieval Europe were incredibly low, especially among the peasantry. The vast majority of the population was illiterate, and even within the nobility, literacy was not always universal, often confined to clerics or scribes. The ability to read and write was a powerful tool, a key to power and influence, and thus closely guarded. You try to recall your own education, the countless hours spent in classrooms, the textbooks, the research papers, the endless stream of online articles. All of it is utterly irrelevant here. History is told through stories, law is dictated by oral custom, and news travels by word of mouth, often distorted and exaggerated. You realize how much you relied on written information to navigate your old world, from street signs to instruction manuals. Here, you are forced to rely on instinct, observation, and the occasional unintelligible grunt from your medieval companions. The few literate individuals you might encounter would primarily be clerics in the church or scribes working for the Lord. These are the keepers of knowledge, the custodians of written records. Monasteries, with their libraries and scriptoria, were the primary centers of learning and book production. But these are worlds away from your muddy, unlettered existence. Even if you found a book, it would likely be in Latin, the universal language of scholarship and the church, or an archaic form of the local vernacular that would be equally incomprehensible. You also realize that paper, as you know it, is expensive and rare. Parchment, made from animal skins, is the primary writing material, a costly and laborious product. A quirky tidbit is that medieval books were often bound in wood and leather, sometimes adorned with metal clasps, making them incredibly heavy and valuable objects, often chained to desks in libraries to prevent theft. You can imagine trying to explain the concept of a Kindle here. They'd probably think it was a wizard's spell book. The lack of education extends beyond reading and writing. Scientific understanding, as you know it, is almost non-existent. Disease is attributed to God's will or bad humors, not germs. Astronomy is intertwined with astrology. The world is flat, or at least that's the prevailing common belief, despite what some scholars might speculate. Your modern knowledge of biology, physics, or chemistry is utterly useless, and trying to explain it would likely earn you bewildered stares, or worse, accusations of heresy. You keep your mouth shut, realizing that your advanced education makes you more of a liability than an asset in this intellectual landscape. Historians still argue whether the medieval period truly experienced a dark age of intellectual stagnation, or if learning simply took different forms and was concentrated in specific institutions like monasteries. For you, living in the dirt, it feels pretty dark. The education children receive is practical, geared entirely towards survival. Boys learn to plow, sow, and hunt. Girls learn to spin, weave, cook, and manage the household. There's no abstract learning, no critical thinking for its own sake. Every skill serves a direct purpose, contributing to the household's ability to feed itself and pay its dues to the Lord. Play, too, is often a form of practical training, mimicking adult tasks. The idea of a child learning algebra or Shakespeare is completely unfathomable. You consider your own memory. In your old life, if you forgot something, you could simply Google it. Here, there's no such recourse. Information relies on memory, on oral tradition, and on the collective wisdom of the community. Elders, like the old woman in your hovel, hold a revered place as the repositories of knowledge and experience. Their stories, their advice, their understanding of the seasons and the land are crucial for the community's survival. You, with your reliance on external databases, feel intellectually vulnerable, your mind a blank slate in a world that values lived wisdom above all else. The absence of widespread literacy also means that communication over distance is incredibly difficult. There are no postal services for the common folk. Messages are carried by travelers, often slowly and with great risk. News spreads through rumor and gossip, filtering down from the Lord's manor or travelers from distant towns. This isolation reinforces the insular nature of the village. Your old world, with its instant global communication, feels like a dazzling, impossible dream that as night descends, and the familiar sounds of the village settle in. You lie on the hard earth, your mind buzzing with the quiet terror of illiteracy. You are intellectually blind in a world that thrives on unwritten rules and practical knowledge. Your greatest strength in your old life, your ability to learn, process, and disseminate information, is utterly useless here. You are just another pair of hands, another mouth to feed, another body susceptible to disease and the whims of the Lord. And the thought of being trapped in this intellectual darkness, without the ability to truly understand or communicate with the world around you, is perhaps one of the most chilling realities of all. The intellectual darkness of your medieval existence, the absence of written knowledge, and the grinding realities of peasant life are constant pressures. But sometimes, the peace of the village is shattered by a far more visceral and terrifying threat: warfare. While your immediate concern is likely survival against hunger or disease, the larger world outside your manor is often in a state of flux, and the echoes of distant conflicts, or even the direct impact of local skirmishes, can ripple through your seemingly isolated life. You might hear rumors first, carried by a passing merchant or a frightened traveler. Whispers of a lord raising his banners, a king mustering his forces, or a border dispute flaring into open conflict. In this era, wars are not fought by professional standing armies as you know them. Instead, they are fought by feudal levies, knights and their retinues bound by oaths to their lords, supplemented by local militias and, yes, even conscripted peasants. A mainstream historical fact is that medieval warfare was often localized, brutal, and characterized by siegecraft, cavalry charges, and close-quarters combat with relatively unsophisticated weaponry. Campaigns were frequently limited by logistics, weather, and the short-term commitments of feudal vassals. Forget precision strikes. This is messy, direct, and terrifying. The impact on your village could be immediate and devastating. If your lord is called to war, he might demand not only his knights and their men-at-arms, but also a contingent of peasants to serve as foot soldiers, archers, or, more likely, laborers to dig trenches, build fortifications, and transport supplies. You, a bewildered modern person, suddenly find yourself facing the prospect of being pressed into military service, forced to march alongside rough, battle-hardened men, armed with nothing more than a crude spear or a pitchfork. Your military experience consists solely of watching historical dramas. Theirs is lived reality. You quickly realize your chances of survival in actual combat are, shall we say, non-existent. Even if you're not directly conscripted, the war can come to you. Passing armies, whether friendly or enemy, are a scourge on the landscape. They need to be fed, supplied, and housed, and they will take what they need from the local populace. Crops can be trampled, livestock slaughtered for provisions, and homes looted. The arrival of soldiers, even those ostensibly on your side, is often a source of immense fear and hardship for the peasantry. You've seen how little your village has. Imagining it stripped bare by hungry, undisciplined troops sends a chill down your spine. You might hear the distant rumble of drums, the mournful blare of trumpets, or even the chilling shouts of men in battle. The sounds of conflict are visceral and terrifying, far removed from the sanitized versions you've heard in movies. The smell of burning wood or straw from a distant village, the sight of smoke plumes on the horizon. These are grim portents of approaching danger. You learn to live with a heightened sense of vigilance, constantly scanning the horizon, listening for the subtle signs of trouble. The weapons themselves are brutally effective in close combat. Swords are heavy, hand-and-a-half weapons, requiring immense strength to wield. Spears are common, versatile tools. Bows, especially the fearsome English longbow, require years of training to master. And then there are axes, maces, and flails, designed for crushing and shattering. You've seen some of these crude tools used for farming, and the idea of them being used for human combat is sickening. A quirky tidbit is that armor, while offering protection, was incredibly heavy and hot. A full suit of plate armor could weigh 50 to 60 pounds, making movement difficult and exhausting. You'd rather take your chances with a good pair of running shoes. But alas, no such luck if the fighting reaches your village. The experience would be pure terror. The clash of steel, the screams of the wounded, the guttural shouts of men in the throes of battle. There's no safe place, no cover. Your small wattle and daub hovel would offer no protection against swords or fire. You'd be caught between warring factions, your only hope to hide, to pray, and to emerge with your life, even if your home and possessions are utterly destroyed. Historians still argue whether medieval warfare was primarily about chivalric glory or simply a brutal exercise in power and destruction. For the peasants caught in its path, it was undoubtedly the latter. The aftermath of war is often as devastating as the conflict itself. Fields lie fallow, homes are burnt, and populations are decimated by famine and disease that often follow in the wake of armies. The recovery could take years, and many simply never fully recover. You realize that your own survival, already precarious, becomes exponentially more tenuous when the drums of war begin to beat. You might see the wounded returning from battle, their injuries gruesome and often untreatable. Amputations, festering, wounds, disfiguring scars. These are the grim trophies of medieval combat. There are no advanced medical facilities, no rehabilitation. Those who survive often live with permanent disabilities, unable to work, a burden on their families, and the already struggling community. You think of modern prosthetics, of physical therapy, and the contrast is stark and heartbreaking. As evening descends, and the air is perhaps still thick with the distant smell of smoke, you lie awake, the sounds of the peaceful night offering little comfort. The threat of violence, of being caught in a conflict you don't understand, fought for reasons that are entirely irrelevant to your survival, is a chilling reality. You are a pawn in a game played by lords and kings, and your only hope is to remain unseen, unchosen, and utterly insignificant. You pray for a long, dull peace, knowing that in medieval times, that's often the greatest luxury of all. Section 16: the brutal realities of warfare, the constant threat of violence, and the pervasive lack of education and comfort all paint a stark picture of your medieval existence. Yet, amidst all these hardships, one institution stands as an unshakable pillar, permeating every aspect of life, from the lowliest peasant hovel to the grandest royal court, the church. You've observed its spiritual influence, but now you begin to grasp its enormous, almost omnipotent, temporal power. The church, specifically the Roman Catholic Church, is not just a religion. It is a parallel government, a vast, wealthy, and highly organized institution that often rivals, and sometimes surpasses, the authority of kings and lords. It owns vast tracts of land, collects its own taxes, the tithe, a tenth of your produce, which is yet another burden on your already meager existence, and has its own legal system, canon law, which governs matters of morality, marriage, and even some disputes between individuals. You realize that your life is not just dictated by your feudal lord, but by the distant, powerful hand of the Pope in Rome and his local representatives. A mainstream historical fact is that the Catholic Church was by far the wealthiest and most powerful institution in medieval Europe, possessing immense landholdings, collecting taxes, tithes, and wielding significant political and moral authority over both rulers and common people. It was literally everywhere, influencing everything that you've seen. The local priest, a figure of immense importance in the village. He is not just a spiritual guide. He is often the most educated person in the community, the keeper of records, the dispenser of advice, and sometimes even the mediator in local disputes. His small church or chapel, even if humble, is likely the most substantial building in the village, a focal point for communal life and a tangible symbol of the church's presence. His sermons, delivered in Latin and then perhaps translated into the vernacular, are your primary source of news and moral instruction from the wider world. You sit through them, trying to glean meaning from the tone and gestures, feeling utterly disconnected from the complex theological doctrines being expounded. The power of the church also extends to your daily morality. Concepts of sin and salvation are deeply ingrained. Feasts and fasts punctuate the year, dictating what you can and cannot eat, when you can and cannot work. Sundays and holy days are mandatory days of rest and religious observance. To defy these rules is not just a social faux pas, it is a sin, incurring the risk of eternal damnation. The fear of hellfire is a very real, very potent motivator, constantly preached by the clergy. You, with your more nuanced modern understanding of ethics, find this stark black and white morality both simplistic and terrifying. There's no room for moral ambiguity here. You also realize that the church provides much of the social welfare system, however rudimentary, that exists. Monasteries often run hospices for the sick, offer charity to the poor, and provide education for those destined for a religious life. They also serve as vital economic centers, employing laborers, trading goods, and preserving knowledge. If you fall ill and your family cannot care for you, your only real hope of organized charity would come from the church. A quirky tidbit is the practice of indulgences, where individuals could pay money to the church to reduce the time their deceased loved ones would spend in purgatory. This controversial practice, while later contributing to the Reformation, highlights the deep belief in the church's spiritual power over the afterlife and its ability to extract wealth from the faithful. You wonder if your credit card would work for that? Probably not. The church's influence is also evident in its architecture. Even a small village church, with its stone construction and stained glass, if it's a wealthier one, stands in stark contrast to the flimsy, impermanent peasant homes. These structures are built to last, to inspire awe, and to symbolize the eternal nature of God and His church. They are places of sanctuary, both spiritual and, at times, literal, offering refuge from worldly dangers. You've noticed the quiet reverence of the villagers inside the church, their faces etched with a mix of awe and supplication. The monastic orders, too, play a significant role. Monks and nuns live apart from the world, dedicating their lives to prayer, study, and labor. They often develop new agricultural techniques, preserve ancient texts, and contribute to the intellectual life of the era. Their disciplined lives and commitment to spiritual pursuits offer a different path, a stark contrast to the rough existence of the peasantry. You consider, for a fleeting moment, if a monastery might offer a softer bed and cleaner clothes, but quickly dismiss the thought. Your modern irreverence would probably not fare well with a vow of silence. Historians still argue whether the medieval church truly acted as a spiritual shepherd for the masses, or if its immense power and wealth often led to corruption and exploitation. You, having just paid your tithe in the form of a scrawny chicken, are leaning towards a bit of both. As the day draws to a close and the light fades, the bell of the nearby parish church tolls, its deep, resonant sound carrying across the fields. It's a sound that marks time, calls to prayer, and reminds everyone of the ever-present authority of the church. You reflect on how completely interwoven religion is with every fiber of this society, from the highest lord to the lowest serf. It offers comfort, meaning, and a moral compass in a chaotic world, but also imposes strictures, demands obedience, and wields immense power over both body and soul. You realize that to truly survive here, you not only have to navigate the physical dangers, but also conform to the unwavering dictates of a faith that governs every aspect of existence. And as you lie on your hard mat, the tolling bell echoing in the stillness, you wonder how much longer you can pretend to understand the sermons. Section 17. The constant pressures of medieval life. The hunger, the cold, the dirt, the brutal laws, the omnipresent church, and the looming threat of warfare have all become your lived reality. You've adapted, in some small, desperate ways, to this new existence. Your senses are dulled to the grime, your stomach has adjusted to the meager diet, and your body, though aching, has developed a new resilience. Yet, despite this forced assimilation, a part of you, deep down, remains stubbornly, achingly modern. That part whispers of a life you left behind, a life that now feels as fantastical to these medieval people as their world does to you. As you lie in the smoky hovel, the familiar sounds of the village settling for the night, your mind drifts. You remember the effortless availability of clean, running water, the simple joy of a hot shower, the comforting hum of electricity, powering lights, refrigerators, and the endless stream of information, the soft luxury of clean clothes, the taste of a truly varied meal, the quiet satisfaction of a well-lit book. These aren't just memories. They're tantalizing, almost painful visions of a world you inhabited, a world that feels increasingly like a dream you might never return to. The simple ability to choose what you wanted to eat, where you wanted to go, or what you wanted to learn, feels like an immense, lost freedom. You think of the information at your fingertips in your old life. Google, Wikipedia, libraries filled with millions of books. Here, knowledge is guarded, scarce, and often superstitious. You're intellectually isolated, unable to truly communicate complex ideas or understand the nuances of their language. The modern concept of progress, of constantly striving for improvement, feels utterly foreign in a world where survival is the highest aspiration. This static existence, while perhaps offering a strange sense of stability, is a crushing weight. On a mind accustomed to constant stimulation and advancement, the sheer technological gap between your two worlds is a chasm you can't bridge. A smartphone, a simple calculator, even a plastic pen, any of these items would be perceived as sorcery and likely get you burned at the stake. Your knowledge of basic science, of germ theory, of mechanics, is useless without the tools or the context to apply it. You couldn't build a modern engine or synthesize penicillin with sticks and mud. You are a walking anachronism, a ghost from the future, utterly powerless to change the past. A mainstream historical fact is that technological innovation during much of the Middle Ages was slow, often occurring incrementally over centuries, unlike the rapid advancements of modern eras. This stagnation, by your standards, is maddening. You wonder about the circumstances of your arrival. Was it a freak accident? Some cosmic error? Is there a way back? The questions gnaw at you, relentless and unanswerable. You scan your memories, trying to find a clue, a trigger, anything that might explain your predicament. But there's only a blank space, a mental void where your transition occurred. This fundamental mystery is perhaps the most tormenting aspect of all. You are here, but you don't know why, or for how long, or if. Escape is even a possibility. The idea of the future's faint echo is a cruel tease. You know what awaits humanity: scientific revolutions, industrialization, enlightenment, incredible technological leaps, and societies built on principles of individual rights and freedoms. You hold a secret, a knowledge of what is to come, a future that these people cannot even conceive. But that knowledge is a burden, not a blessing. You cannot share it, cannot accelerate their progress, cannot warn them of impending plagues or conflicts. You are a silent observer, carrying the weight of centuries of progress in your mind, while living in a world still grappling with fundamental survival. Historians still argue whether medieval people had a concept of progress, or if they viewed history as cyclical or linear towards a divinely ordained end. You, however, are a living embodiment of linear progress, stuck in a cyclical reality that you've learned to value the small comforts. The warmth of the communal fire, the simple satisfaction of a full stomach, the quiet moments of shared humanity. With your strange, new family, you've adapted to the routines, the unspoken rules, the harsh beauty of this brutal world. But every now and then, a memory flashes, the crisp scent of a modern grocery store, the effortless glide of a train, the sheer, unimaginable luxury of anonymity in a crowd. And in those moments, the full weight of your displacement crashes down, a wave of profound longing for a life that feels increasingly like a fleeting dream. You try to find hope. Is there a chance? Will something trigger your return? Or are you simply destined to live out your days as a medieval peasant, your modern consciousness slowly eroding under the relentless pressure of this pre-industrial world? The uncertainty is a deeper cold than any winter chill. You cling to the faintest whisper of a future, even as the present asserts its unyielding grip. This isn't a game, it's your life now. And the only thing you can do is survive, one grimy, exhausting day at a time, hoping against hope that the echo of the future will somehow, someday, call you home. The sounds of the village are softening, now, fading into the quiet of the deep night. The wind whispers through the thatch, a soft, murmuring sound. The embers in the hearth glow faintly, casting a last, gentle warmth. Your mind, weary from the day's toil and the weight of your thoughts, begins to slow. The vivid images of this harsh medieval world begin to soften at their edges, blurring into the comforting darkness. The chill in the air seems less biting, the smells less pungent, as sleep draws you deeper. You are safe now, in this moment, held in the quiet embrace of the night. Let the world outside fade. Let the worries drift away like smoke into the vast, silent sky. Rest, drift, dream of soft things, of warmth, of peace. The journey is paused, and for now, there is only the gentle lullaby of the quiet.